My name is Maud Wilson, and I'm 58 years old. After my husband passed away, I opened my home to my only son James and his wife Stephanie when they were struggling financially. I even helped with their mortgage while working remotely as an accountant. Everything seemed fine until baby Lily arrived. I became more than a grandmother. I became the unpaid help. Then came that dinner with her parents when Stephanie casually referred to me as the maid. The look on everyone's face when I handed her my house keys the next day was priceless. Before I tell you how I ended up handing over my house keys to my ungrateful daughter-in-law, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever dealt with an entitled family member. The day Robert died was the day I truly understood what it meant to have your world stop turning. We had been married for 35 years, building a life together, brick by brick, dream by dream. Our 4-bedroom house in Cedar Grove was our pride and joy. We had designed it together, arguing good-naturedly over whether the kitchen should open to the living room or whether the master bedroom should face east for morning sunlight. Robert always said the sunrise would wake me too early, but I insisted. Now, 5 years after his passing, I still thank myself for that decision every morning when golden light floods my bedroom. My career as an accountant had always been steady, even through the economic ups and downs. When remote work became more common, I gratefully transitioned to working from home. It gave me freedom while allowing me to maintain the lifestyle Robert and I had built together. My home office overlooking the garden became my sanctuary after he was gone. James, my only child, had been my rock after Robert's funeral. At 32, he had his father's height and kind eyes, though perhaps not his father's practicality. He visited regularly during that first year, often bringing groceries or fixing things around the house that Robert would have handled. I cherished those visits even as I encouraged him to focus on his own life. He met Stephanie at the software company where he worked as a developer. She was in the marketing department, sleek and ambitious, with a ready smile that didn't always reach her eyes. When James brought her to Sunday dinner for the first time, I noticed how she assessed my home, her gaze lingering on the vaulted ceilings and custom woodwork that Robert had been so proud of. Their courtship was a whirlwind. 8 months after meeting James, called to tell me they were engaged. I voiced my concerns about the rush, gently, but he was in love and certain. The wedding was small but elegant, and I did my best to welcome Stephanie into our family with open arms despite my private reservations. Stephanie had a way of talking about her career goals that made them sound like foregone conclusions. Director of Marketing by 30, Chief Marketing Officer by 35. She spoke confidently about the future, about travel and achievement, with James nodding along admiringly. Reality, however, had other plans for them. The housing market in our city had skyrocketed, placing most decent homes far beyond what a young couple could afford, even with their combined salaries. After 6 months of marriage, they were still living in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment with most of their income going to rent. I could see the strain it was putting on them. James looked tired during our weekly dinners, and Stephanie seemed increasingly frustrated. When they mentioned they were considering moving to another state where housing was cheaper, I made the offer that would change all our lives. Why don't you move in with me? The house is too big for just me, and we could help each other out. The relief on James's face was immediate. Stephanie's expression was more complex, a mixture of gratitude and calculation. We discussed the financial arrangements over dessert. They would contribute to utilities and groceries while I would continue covering the mortgage. It seemed like the perfect solution. I would have company in my too-empty house, and they could save for their future. "Mom, are you sure?" James asked, squeezing my hand. "It's a big change to have us invade your space." "This house was meant for a family," I assured him, thinking of how Robert and I had planned for more children who never came. "It will be good to hear laughter in it again." Stephanie raised her wine glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, her smile wide, "and to the most generous mother-in-law a girl could ask for." If only I had recognized the warning in her two bright eyes, perhaps things would have turned out differently. But at that moment, I was simply happy to have found a way to keep my son close while giving the young couple a chance to get ahead financially. We all clinked glasses full of optimism about our shared future under one roof. The moving day arrived with chaos and excitement. James and Stephanie arrived with a rental truck full of furniture and boxes. I had spent the previous week clearing out the 2 spare bedrooms and half of the garage to make space for them. As they unloaded their belongings, I couldn't help but notice how many designer clothes Stephanie possessed, or the expensive electronics they prioritized setting up first. "Where should we put our sectional?" Stephanie asked, gesturing to a sleek gray sofa that looked brand new. I glanced at my comfortable but admittedly worn living room set, which held memories of movie nights with Robert and James. "Maybe the basement recreation room. There's plenty of space down there for a sitting area." She nodded, but I caught the slight downturn of her mouth. Later that evening, after a dinner of takeout pizza and celebratory champagne, we all went to bed exhausted but hopeful about our new arrangement. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test my patience, my boundaries, and ultimately, my sense of self-worth in ways I never could have imagined. The changes began subtly. A few weeks after James and Stephanie moved in, I noticed one of my favorite landscape paintings missing from the hallway wall. It was a watercolor that Robert and I had bought on our 20th anniversary trip to Maine, a peaceful seascape that always calmed me when I passed it. I found it leaning against the wall in the basement storage room, carefully placed but definitely removed. In its place hung a modern abstract print in sharp black and white. "Oh, I hope you don't mind," Stephanie said when I mentioned it. "I thought we could freshen up the common areas a bit. Your painting is lovely, but it doesn't really go with the updated look I'm trying to create." Updated look. I hadn't realized my home needed updating, but I swallowed my objection, telling myself to be flexible. This was a shared living situation now, and some compromises were to be expected, but the painting was just the beginning. Gradually, more of my belongings began to migrate to the basement. The handcrafted throw pillows my sister had made, the collection of family photos that had lined the staircase, the antique clock that had been my grandmother's. Each time, Stephanie had a reason delivered with a smile that grew less apologetic with each item relocated. "These spaces should reflect all of us living here, don't you think?" she would say. But somehow, all of us started to look exclusively like Stephanie's taste. James seemed oblivious to these changes, or perhaps he simply chose not to notice. When I attempted to bring it up casually during our morning coffee, a tradition we had maintained since his childhood, he shrugged it off. "Steph just has a good eye for design, Mom. The place does look more modern now, you have to admit." Even my kitchen, which had always been my domain, wasn't immune to Stephanie's influence. She replaced my well-seasoned cast-iron cookware with shiny stainless steel pots that she insisted were more hygienic. My collection of handwritten recipe cards passed down from my mother and grandmother were digitized and the originals stored away because they were cluttering the counter. "You know, Maud," Stephanie said one evening as I was preparing dinner, my way of contributing to the household, "you really should try using less butter in your cooking. James and I are trying to be healthier." I nodded politely, even as I noticed she had no problem serving herself a generous portion of my supposedly unhealthy pot roast later that evening. The criticisms of my cooking became a regular occurrence, sometimes subtle, sometimes less so. "Don't you think the chicken is a little dry tonight?" Or, "This would be amazing with less salt," or, "We should try a vegan night once a week." At family gatherings, Stephanie's passive-aggressive comments increased. When my sister complimented my pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, Stephanie quickly jumped in. "Maud does make good traditional desserts. I've been trying to introduce some more contemporary recipes, but you know how resistant older generations can be to change." I was 58, hardly ancient, but Stephanie had a way of making me feel outdated and irrelevant. Meanwhile, James became increasingly distant. The son who had once shared everything with me now deflected personal conversations toward safe topics like sports or the weather. When I asked about their financial planning or how work was going, he would give vague answers before finding a reason to leave the room. "James seems different," my friend Patricia remarked after visiting for coffee one afternoon. "And that wife of his doesn't show you nearly enough respect in your own home." "They're just settling in." I defended, though doubt had taken root in my heart. "It's an adjustment for everyone." Patricia fixed me with a knowing look. "Just be careful, Maud. I've seen this situation before with my cousin. Started with rearranging furniture and ended with her feeling like a guest in her own home." I dismissed her concerns outwardly, but they echoed my own growing unease. Still, I was committed to making this arrangement work. I kept reminding myself that this was what Robert would have wanted for me to help our son establish himself. Then, 6 months into our living arrangement, Stephanie made an announcement over dinner that changed everything. "We're pregnant," she exclaimed, showing us a tiny ultrasound image. "You're going to be a grandmother, Maud." My heart soared with genuine joy. A grandchild, Robert, would have been over the moon. James looked happier than I had seen him in months as he wrapped an arm around Stephanie's shoulders. "That's wonderful news," I said, tears welling up. For a moment, all my misgivings were forgotten in the face of this miracle. Stephanie beamed one hand protectively over her still flat stomach. "We'll need to convert the home office into a nursery, of course. I'm thinking a neutral theme with natural elements." My home office, my sanctuary. The words hit me like a cold wave, but I forced a smile. "Of course, whatever you need." In that moment, I truly believed that a baby would bring us all closer together, that Stephanie and I would bond over the shared experience of motherhood, that James would find his way back to the son I had known. I was partly right. The household did revolve around the coming baby, but not in the way I had hoped. Stephanie's pregnancy became another tool to exert control over every aspect of our living situation. "Maud, could you not use those cleaning products? The chemicals could harm the baby." "We need to keep the temperature at 72 degrees for optimal fetal development. Please don't cook fish. The smell makes me nauseous." Each request seemed reasonable on its own, especially from an expectant mother, but collectively, they further eroded my autonomy in my own home. Increasingly, I retreated to my bedroom, the one space that remained truly mine, though even there I felt like an intruder when Stephanie would knock and enter without waiting for a response, usually with some new pregnancy-related demand. My friends saw what was happening before I fully admitted it to myself, but I was committed now more than ever. There was a baby coming, my grandchild, and I would endure whatever I needed to be part of that child's life. Little did I know that the arrival of baby Lily would push our already strained relationship to its breaking point, setting the stage for a confrontation that would ultimately force me to make the most difficult decision of my life since losing Robert. Lily. Olivia Reynolds entered the world on a stormy Tuesday in October, 7 pounds 2 ounces of pure perfection. The moment the nurse placed her in my arms at the hospital, I felt that same rush of overwhelming love that I had experienced when James was born. Her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb, and I made a silent promise to always be there for her. "She looks just like James did as a baby," I whispered, tracing her delicate features with my gaze. "Really? Everyone in the delivery room said she looks exactly like me," Stephanie responded from her hospital bed voice, still weak from labor but firm in her correction. James, exhausted but beaming with pride, diplomatically suggested, "I think she's the perfect mix of both our families." The first few weeks after bringing Lily home were a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and the unique symphony of a newborn's cries and coos. Stephanie struggled with postpartum recovery and establishing breastfeeding, often dissolving into tears of frustration when Lily wouldn't latch properly. I stepped in without being asked, drawing on memories of my own early days with James. I sterilized bottles, prepared formula as a supplement, and took the 2 a.m. feeding shift so the new parents could get a few hours of consecutive sleep. "Thank God you're here, Mom," James said one morning, eyes ringed with exhaustion as I handed him a cup of coffee. "I don't know how we'd manage without you." Stephanie said nothing but accepted my help with a tight nod. I understood her struggle, the complex emotions of wanting to do everything perfectly for your baby, while your body and mind adjusted to the seismic shift of motherhood. I tried to help without overstepping to suggest rather than instruct. As the weeks passed, my financial contributions to the household increased significantly. Diapers, wipes, formula when needed, and the 1,000 other unexpected expenses of a newborn seemed to always find their way onto my credit card. I didn't mind considering it an investment in my granddaughter's well-being, but I noticed that neither James nor Stephanie ever mentioned these costs or offered to reimburse me. When Stephanie's 12-week maternity leave ended, the household dynamics shifted again. Both parents needed to return to work, and childcare in our area was prohibitively expensive. "We've been looking at daycare centers," James told me over dinner one night, "but the waiting lists are at least 6 months, and the cost is more than our rent was at the apartment." I knew where this conversation was heading before he even asked. I could watch Lily during the day. I offered, already mentally rearranging my work schedule to accommodate. I can shift my accounting work to evenings and nap times. The relief on both their faces was immediate, though Stephanie quickly added, "We'd need to establish some ground rules, of course. I have very specific ideas about how I want Lily raised." Those specific ideas turned out to be an exhaustive list of regulations that grew longer by the day. No screen time whatsoever. Only organic baby food, preferably homemade. A strict nap schedule that had to be followed to the minute. No taking Lily outside if the temperature was below 65 or above 80 degrees. No visitors who hadn't received their TDAP vaccine. The list went on and on. I followed these rules diligently, wanting to respect Stephanie's wishes as Lily's mother, but sometimes the rules seemed arbitrary or changed without warning. "Why did you put her in the yellow onesie?" Stephanie demanded one evening when she returned from work. "I told you the yellow one is only for special occasions." "I'm sorry," I apologized, though I had no recollection of this particular rule. The one she was wearing got soiled, and it was the first clean one I grabbed. Stephanie pursed her lips in disapproval. "Now we don't have a clean special occasion outfit if we need one." James, who once would have diffused such moments with humor, now stayed silent during these interactions, busying himself with his phone or suddenly remembering an email he needed to send for work. When I tried to speak with him privately about the mounting tension, he became defensive. "Stephanie is under a lot of pressure trying to balance work and motherhood," he said, avoiding eye contact. "We just need to be supportive right now." "I am being supportive," I replied carefully, "but I'm starting to feel like nothing I do is ever right in her eyes." "That's not fair, Mom. We couldn't manage without you." But his tone lacked conviction, and he changed the subject before I could respond further. Meanwhile, my relationship with Lily blossomed. Despite all the rules and restrictions, our days together were filled with quiet joys. The way she gurgled with delight when I sang the same lullabies I had once sung to James. Her concentrated expression as she discovered her own hands. The sweet weight of her sleeping on my chest during afternoon naps. I documented all her milestones meticulously in the baby journal Stephanie had bought, but never seemed to find time to write in. First smile, first rollover, first solid food. I took photos and videos, printing the best ones for an album and sending others to James and Stephanie throughout the day. "You don't need to send quite so many pictures," Stephanie commented after I had texted a particularly adorable sequence of Lily discovering her reflection in a mirror. "It's distracting during meetings." As Lily grew, so did my role in her care, extending well beyond standard childcare hours. When she was teething and fussy at night, it was often me who walked the floors with her so her parents could sleep before their workday. When she caught her first cold, I was the one who sat in the steamy bathroom with her for hours helping clear her congestion. All this while maintaining my accounting practice during stolen hours, often working until midnight, after everyone else was asleep and still covering the majority of household expenses. Stephanie's friends began visiting more frequently young mothers with their own infants for playdates with Lily. During these gatherings, I was invisible unless needed to fetch refreshments or change a diaper. "Your mother-in-law is still living with you," I overheard one friend ask Stephanie while I prepared lunch in the kitchen. "God, I could never. My mother-in-law drives me crazy after just one weekend visit." Stephanie's laugh had a brittle edge. "It has its advantages. Built-in babysitting, you know, and she handles most of the cooking and cleaning." "Like Mary Poppins, but permanent," another friend joked, and they all laughed as though I couldn't hear them from 15 feet away. The invisible line between family member and household staff was blurring more each day. When had I transitioned from grandma to the help? The question haunted me as I folded yet another load of laundry that wasn't mine, prepared another meal that would be critiqued, cleaned another mess I hadn't made. I thought often of my friend's warnings of Patricia's concerned face as she told me to be careful. I thought of Robert wondering what he would say if he could see how I was being treated in the home we had built together with so much love. But then, Lily would reach for me with her chubby arms, her face lighting up at the sight of me, and I would push these thoughts away. For her, I told myself, I'm doing this for her. What I didn't realize was that by allowing myself to be diminished in my granddaughter's eyes, I was setting a terrible example of what she should expect from relationships in her own life. It would take one more humiliation public and cutting to finally make me understand that lesson. The invitation to dinner came from Stephanie, delivered with unusual warmth. Her parents, Gerald and Vivian Pierce, were visiting from Connecticut and wanted to see their granddaughter. Stephanie suggested we all dine together at our home, which surprised me given her previous reluctance to entertain. "I'll handle everything," I offered, already mentally planning a menu that would impress. "That would be great." Stephanie readily agreed. "Dad loves a good roast if you could manage that, and Mom is particular about desserts, so maybe that apple tart you made at Christmas." I spent the entire day preparing for their visit. The prime rib was expensive, but I wanted everything to be perfect. I baked the apple tart from scratch, polished the good silver that had been a wedding present from my own mother, and set the dining room table with my best linens and china. By 5 o'clock, the house smelled wonderful and looked immaculate. I had even found time to put on a nice blouse and slacks, adding a touch of mascara and lipstick, wanting to make a good second impression on Stephanie's parents, whom I had only met briefly at the wedding. They arrived precisely at 6, Gerald tall and distinguished with silver hair, Vivian elegantly dressed with the same sleek blonde hair as her daughter, though hers was clearly maintained with expensive salon visits. They cooed appropriately over Lily, who was dressed in the designated special occasion yellow onesie and handed over lavish gifts for their granddaughter. "Something smells wonderful," Gerald commented after the initial greetings were exchanged. "Maud has been cooking all day," James said, the first acknowledgement of my efforts. "How lovely to have someone who enjoys cooking," Vivian remarked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Stephanie never had the patience for it, did you, dear?" Stephanie laughed lightly. "Why bother when you can order in from anywhere these days?" We moved to the dining room where I served the first course, a butternut squash soup that had been Robert's favorite. The conversation flowed easily enough, with Gerald asking James about his work and Vivian updating Stephanie on various family members back east. It wasn't until we were halfway through the main course that the conversation turned to our living arrangement. "So how long have you all been living together?" Gerald asked, cutting into his perfectly medium rare roast. "About 18 months now," James answered. "It's been a great setup, especially with Lily's arrival." "And how does that work financially?" Gerald pressed, ever the investment banker. "The housing market in this area is brutal, I understand." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I kept my eyes on my plate, not wanting to embarrass James and Stephanie by revealing the full extent of my contributions. "We have an arrangement," James finally said vaguely. "Maud owns the house," Stephanie added, reaching for her wineglass. "We contribute to utilities and groceries." "And the mortgage?" Gerald asked, directly looking at me. "I handle that," I admitted quietly. "It's nearly paid off anyway." Gerald's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's quite generous." "Well, family helps family," I said, trying to redirect the conversation. "Would anyone like more potatoes? And how do you divide the household duties?" Vivian inquired, ignoring my attempt to change the subject. "With both of you working and a baby in the mix, it must be challenging." Another awkward pause. I could see James shifting in his seat, likely uncomfortable with admitting that I had become the default housekeeper in addition to providing free childcare and subsidizing their living expenses. That's when Stephanie let out a short, sharp laugh and said the words that would change everything. "Oh, Maud's basically our live-in maid at this point, aren't you, Maud?" The table went completely silent. I felt the blood drain from my face, my fork suspended halfway to my mouth. James stared at his wife in shock. Even Lily, secured in her high chair, seemed to sense the sudden tension, her little face scrunching up in concern. Vivian cleared her throat delicately. Gerald became very interested in rearranging his silverware. Neither contradicted their daughter or offered any comment that might have softened the blow. I placed my fork down carefully on my plate, folded my napkin, and stood up with as much dignity as I could muster. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, my voice impressively steady considering the storm raging inside me. "I need to check on the dessert." In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter and took several deep breaths. A maid. After everything I had done, everything I had given, that was how my daughter-in-law saw me. Worse, she had felt comfortable enough to say it aloud in company to my face. And my son had said nothing in my defense. I composed myself, cut the apple tart, and arranged it on dessert plates with small scoops of vanilla ice cream. My hands performed these tasks automatically while my mind was elsewhere, traveling back through months of accumulated slights and dismissals, seeing them now in the harsh light of Stephanie's casual revelation. When I returned to the dining room, conversation had resumed, though, in a stilted fashion. I served dessert with a polite smile fixed firmly on my face, accepting compliments on the tart, with gracious nods while inside something fundamental had shifted. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of meaningless small talk and performative politeness. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and retreated to my bedroom. Sleep was impossible. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across it as cars passed outside their headlights, briefly illuminating the room before disappearing. "The maid," I whispered to the darkness, testing the words, feeling their sting afresh. Robert would never have allowed anyone to speak to me that way, not even our son's wife. Robert would have. But Robert wasn't here. It was just me alone, in our bed in our house that no longer felt like mine. And as the first pale light of dawn crept through the windows, I had once insisted face east. I made a decision that had been 18 months in the making. No more. I would be the maid no longer. The sunrise painted my bedroom in shades of gold and amber, a new day dawning with new clarity. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I saw my situation with perfect sharpness, stripped of the justifications and excuses I had been making. I reached for my laptop and began researching apartment rentals in the area. Something small but pleasant not too far from here so I could still see Lily regularly. My financial situation was solid despite my generous subsidizing of James and Stephanie's lifestyle. I had my accounting practice, my retirement savings, and the life insurance policy Robert had left. I could easily afford to live independently. At 7:30, I called my best friend Linda, who answered with sleep still clouding her voice. "Maud, is everything okay? You never call this early." "I need your advice," I said, and then the whole story came pouring out, ending with Stephanie's "Maid" comment and my sleepless night. Linda was silent for a moment after I finished. Then she said, "It's about damn time, Maud. I've been waiting for you to wake up and see what's been happening. What can I do to help?" Her immediate support brought tears to my eyes. "I found a few apartments to look at. Would you come with me?" "I'll pick you up in an hour," she promised. "And Maud, I'm proud of you." After hanging up, I showered and dressed with care, choosing a tailored blue dress that always made me feel confident. I heard James and Stephanie moving around downstairs, getting ready for work. The routine morning sounds of coffee brewing and Lily babbling in her high chair. I left a note saying I had errands to run and slipped out before I had to face them. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I needed to have my plan fully in place first. Linda and I visited 3 apartments that morning. The second one, a sunny one-bedroom in a well-maintained building about 10 minutes from my current home, felt right immediately. It had a small balcony overlooking a community garden, an updated kitchen, and built-in bookshelves that reminded me of the ones Robert had installed in our first apartment together. "It's perfect." I told the property manager, a kind-faced woman about my age. "How soon could I move in?" "The current tenant leaves at the end of the month, so 2 weeks," she replied. "Are you sure you don't want to think about it overnight?" I shook my head firmly. "I've done enough thinking. I'll take it." By noon, I had signed a lease agreement and put down a deposit. Linda squeezed my hand as we walked back to her car. "What's next on the liberation agenda?" she asked, a supportive smile lighting her face. "I need to meet with my financial advisor," I said. "And then I think I need to buy some new furniture. A fresh start deserves fresh surroundings, don't you think?" The meeting with Alan. My financial advisor of 15 years was reassuring. He reviewed my accounts and nodded approvingly at my decision. "Frankly, Maud, I've been concerned about the withdrawals I've seen over the past year," he admitted. "They've been significantly higher than your historical patterns." "I've been subsidizing 3 additional people," I explained. Alan frowned slightly. "And will you continue to help them financially after you move out?" It was a question I had been pondering all morning. "No," I said finally. "They're both employed with good salaries. The house is almost paid off. It's time they stood on their own feet." "I agree," Alan said, making some notes. "Let's adjust your budget to reflect your new living situation. You'll find you have quite a comfortable cushion for yourself." By the time I returned home, it was after 5. James's car was in the driveway, meaning both he and Stephanie were home from work. Perfect. I preferred to have this conversation once with both of them present. I found them in the kitchen, James warming a bottle for Lily, while Stephanie scrolled through her phone at the table. They both looked up with mild surprise when I entered Stephanie's eyes, taking in my dress and makeup with a slightly puzzled expression. "You look nice," James commented. "Where were you all day?" "We need to talk," I said calmly, sitting down across from Stephanie. "After Lily is settled for the evening, please." Something in my tone must have alerted them that this was serious. They exchanged a quick glance. "Is everything okay, Mom?" James asked, concern creeping into his voice. "We'll discuss it after dinner," I replied, already moving to the refrigerator to begin preparing a meal. One last dinner in my kitchen, I thought to myself. Let me make it count. I prepared pasta with a sauce that had been James's favorite since childhood, accompanied by a crisp salad and garlic bread. We ate mostly in silence, the tension obvious despite my attempts at normal conversation. Lily provided welcome distraction, gleefully smearing sauce across her face and giggling when I pretended to steal noodles from her tray. After dinner, James gave Lily her bath while Stephanie and I cleaned up the kitchen, working side by side in uncomfortable silence. Once Lily was asleep, we all gathered in the living room, James and Stephanie on the sofa, me in the armchair that had been Robert's favorite. "So, what's this about?" Stephanie asked, impatience edging her tone. I took a deep breath and looked directly at her. "Last night at dinner, you referred to me as your live-in maid." Stephanie had the grace to flush slightly. "Oh, that? I was just joking, Maud. My parents knew it was a joke." "Did they?" I asked quietly, because no one laughed. "Mom, Steph didn't mean anything by it," James interjected, already moving to smooth things over as he always did. "You know how she kids around." "Do I?" I replied, turning my gaze to my son. "Because it didn't sound like a joke to me. It sounded like the truth as Stephanie sees it. And what bothers me even more than her saying it is that you didn't contradict her." James shifted uncomfortably. "It all happened so fast. Let me finish, please," I said, raising a hand. "I've spent the last 18 months opening my home to you both. I've covered the mortgage, most of the utilities, and countless other expenses. I've provided free childcare for Lily while rearranging my entire professional life to do so. I've cooked, cleaned, and done laundry for this household with very little acknowledgement, let alone appreciation." Stephanie's expression had hardened. "So you're keeping score. I thought family helped family. Isn't that what you said last night?" "Family does help family," I agreed. "But family also respects family. Family doesn't treat family like household staff. Family doesn't remove beloved possessions without asking. Family doesn't criticize and control and diminish." "That's not fair," James protested, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "What isn't fair is how I've been treated in my own home," I replied steadily, "and I've decided I won't accept it anymore." "What does that mean exactly?" Stephanie asked, her voice taking on a defensive edge. I reached into my purse and pulled out a set of house keys, placing them on the coffee table between us. "It means I'm moving out. I've signed a lease on an apartment and I'll be leaving at the end of the month." The shock on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. James's mouth actually fell open and Stephanie went completely still. "You can't be serious," James finally managed. "I'm entirely serious," I assured him. "I've given this a great deal of thought." "But what about Lily?" Stephanie asked, her first thought going to the childcare implications, rather than my well-being, I noted. "I love Lily dearly, and I want to remain an active part of her life. We can work out a schedule for visits that works for everyone." "Mom, please," James said, leaning forward. "If this is about what Stephanie said, she'll apologize." "Won't you, Steph?" Stephanie looked cornered. "Of course. I'm sorry if my joke hurt your feelings, Maud. I didn't mean anything by it." "This isn't just about last night," I explained. "Last night was simply the moment when I finally saw clearly what's been happening for months. I've become invisible in my own home, useful only for what I provide, not for who I am." I pushed the keys further toward them. "The mortgage has 4 payments left. The property taxes are due in November. The homeowner's insurance renews in January." I stood up, feeling lighter with each word. "Good luck with the mortgage payments." Stephanie's face paled as the financial implications began to sink in. "You can't just dump this on us with no warning. You both have good jobs," I pointed out reasonably. "You should be able to handle the remaining expenses without trouble." "But we have plans," she protested. We've been saving for a vacation to Hawaii next spring, and I need a new car, and there's Lily's college fund to think about. All worthy goals. I agreed, which you can work toward the way most young couples do by budgeting carefully and perhaps making some sacrifices. James had been silent, a deep frown creasing his forehead. Where will you go? He finally asked, his voice small. I found a lovely apartment not far from here. Linda helped me look at places today. You told Linda before you told us. He sounded hurt. I needed a friend's perspective, I said simply. And there's nothing we can say to change your mind. His eyes finally met mine, and I saw genuine distress there. My heart softened slightly. Despite everything, he was still my son, still the baby boy. I had rocked through colicky nights, the child whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenager whose heart I had helped mend after his first breakup. This isn't about punishing you, James. It's about reclaiming myself. I've spent the last year and a half diminishing myself to accommodate you both, and it hasn't made any of us happier. You and Stephanie need to build your own life, make your own mistakes, find your own solutions. And I need to remember who I am beyond being your mother or Lily's grandmother. Stephanie had moved from shock to anger. So you're just abandoning us after everything we've done for you. The audacity of that statement momentarily robbed me of speech. Everything you've done for me, I finally echoed, incredulous. Yes. You were all alone in this big house, probably depressed after your husband died. We gave you company, a reason to get up in the morning. We gave you Lily. Her voice rose with each sentence. I took a steadying breath, refusing to match her tone. I appreciate that you see it that way, Stephanie, but that perspective rather proves my point about how differently we view this situation. I turned back to James. I'll always be your mother and I'll always love you. But I can't continue living like this. The keys are on the table. I'll be moving at the end of the month, but I'm going to stay with Linda until then to give us all some space to adjust to this new reality. With that, I walked upstairs to pack a bag with enough essentials to last a couple of weeks. I could hear them arguing in fierce whispers downstairs, Stephanie's voice occasionally rising in indignation, James's lower responses impossible to make out. I focused on folding clothes neatly into my suitcase, selecting a few treasured photographs, gathering my important documents. When I came back downstairs, suitcase in hand, they were still in the living room. The keys remained untouched on the coffee table as if they were radioactive. I'll be in touch about arrangements to collect the rest of my things, I said from the doorway, and about visiting Lily. James stood up, his expression a mixture of confusion, hurt, and something else, something that might have been the first stirrings of understanding. Mom, I didn't realize, he began. I know, I said gently. That's part of the problem. I walked to the front door, pausing with my hand on the knob. I love you, James. That hasn't changed and won't change, but sometimes love means allowing people to face the consequences of their actions. And with those words, I stepped out into the evening air, closing the door firmly behind me on one chapter of my life and opening the door to whatever came next. The first night in Linda's guest bedroom, I lay awake listening to the unfamiliar creaks and settling sounds of someone else's house. My thoughts kept returning to the expression on James's face as I'd walked out the door, that mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. Had I been too harsh? Should I have given them more warning? The questions circled endlessly. My phone had been buzzing with texts from James since about an hour after I'd left. I finally checked them around midnight. Mom, please come home. We can talk about this. This isn't like you. Are you having some kind of breakdown? Stephanie's really upset. Can we please just discuss this like adults? The mortgage is how much? There's no way we can afford this on our own. That last one made me sigh heavily. Had they truly been so oblivious to the financial reality they'd been living in? Or had they simply chosen not to think about it, comfortable in the cushion my generosity provided? The next morning, over coffee, Linda asked, So, how does it feel to be a free woman? I considered the question carefully. Strange, scary, exhilarating, sad, all of those things at once. That sounds about right. She nodded. When Mark and I divorced, I felt like I was falling off a cliff and sprouting wings at the same time. James called while I was helping Linda prepare lunch, his voice tight with stress. Mom, we need to talk about the financial situation here. I've been looking at the mortgage statements and the household accounts. I had no idea you were covering so much. I'm surprised by that, I replied honestly. I never hid any of the expenses from you. I guess I never really asked, he admitted, a note of shame creeping into his voice. But Mom, there's no way we can manage these payments on our own right now. Stephanie's company is going through a restructuring and she's worried about her position. We've been putting most of our extra money into Lily's college fund and our retirement accounts. Those are wise priorities, I acknowledged. But James, you're both 30-something professionals. The remaining mortgage payments are not insurmountable. Could you at least keep covering it until we have time to rearrange our finances? He pleaded. Just a few months. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pull of maternal responsibility, warring with my new resolve. No, James. I've already subsidized your living expenses for a year and a half. It's time for you to figure this out as a couple. So, that's it? You're just cutting us off completely. The stress in his voice had shifted toward anger. I'm not cutting you off, as you put it. I'm expecting you to be the independent adult I raised you to be. There's a difference. After we hung up, Linda gave me an approving nod. You held firm. Good for you. It doesn't feel good, I confessed. It feels terrible to say no to him when he's asking for help. That's because you're a mother, Linda said simply. But you're also a woman who deserves respect and consideration, not to be treated like the help. 2 days later, I received a text from Stephanie, the first direct communication from her since I'd left. James says you won't help with the mortgage anymore. Fine, but you should know that if you're not going to support this family, we'll have to reconsider your access to Lily. Childcare costs are expensive, and we were counting on you for that too. My hands shook with anger as I read her attempt at manipulation. Using my granddaughter as leverage was a new low even for Stephanie. I showed the message to Linda, who let out a low whistle. That's playing dirty, she remarked. What are you going to do? I'm going to respond calmly and clearly, I said, taking a deep breath. And then I'm going to call my lawyer. My reply to Stephanie was brief. I understand this transition is stressful for everyone. However, attempting to limit my relationship with my granddaughter will not solve your financial concerns. I suggest we all take some time to cool down before discussing visitation arrangements. The call to my lawyer, however, was much more detailed. Eleanor Thompson had handled Robert's estate and had become something of a friend over the years. They're unlikely to have any legal grounds to prevent you from seeing your granddaughter, she assured me, after hearing the situation. But just to be safe, let's document the care you've provided and the relationship you've established. Grandparents' rights vary by state, but given your involvement in Lily's life from birth, you'd have a strong case if they actually tried to follow through on this threat, which I doubt they will once they've had time to think clearly. Her confidence was reassuring, but the threat still stung deeply. That evening, I pulled out photo albums and scrolled through my phone looking at pictures of Lily's first year of life, so many of them with me, holding her, feeding her, rocking her to sleep. The thought of being separated from her was physically painful. But I remembered what my father used to say, don't negotiate with emotional terrorists. Stephanie's threat was designed to make me cave to keep me financially entangled and maintain the status quo that benefited them at my expense. If I gave in now, it would never end. The next week passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I finalized the lease on my new apartment, ordered furniture for delivery, and began the process of sorting through which possessions I would take with me and which I would leave behind for now. James called every other day, his approaches evolving from anger to bargaining to reluctant acceptance. We're looking at refinancing options for the house, he told me during our most recent conversation, and Stephanie's looking into whether Lily can get on the wait list for the daycare at her company. It's subsidized for employees. That sounds like a good plan, I said, relieved that they were starting to take responsibility. How is Lily doing? She asks for Gamma at bedtime, he said, his voice softening. She's used to you reading her that bunny book. My heart clenched. I miss her too. I'd like to come and see her this weekend if that would be okay. There was a pause before he answered. Stephanie's still pretty upset, Mom. Maybe give it another week. I swallowed my disappointment. All right, but please tell Lily that Grandma loves her very much. I will, he promised before hanging up. 2 weeks after I had walked out of my own front door, I moved into my new apartment. Linda and her husband helped me arrange the furniture and hang pictures, transforming the blank space into something that already felt more like a home than my house had in months. It's charming, Linda declared, standing in the middle of the living room with her hands on her hips. Very you. I looked around at the comfortable armchair positioned by the window for reading the bookshelves, filled with volumes I'd brought from the house, the photographs of Robert James and Lily arranged on the wall in a pleasing pattern. It was smaller than what I was used to, certainly, but there was a coziness to it that felt right. It is, isn't it? I agreed. I think I'm going to be happy here. That night, alone in my new place, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I missed the familiar surroundings of the home Robert and I had built together, the memories embedded in every corner. I missed Lily fiercely, her baby giggles, and the sweet smell of her hair after a bath. I even missed James, the son who had once shared everything with me. But beneath the sadness was something unexpected, something I hadn't felt in a very long time possibility. The future, stretched before me, unwritten, full of potential. For the first time since Robert's death, I was making choices solely for myself without filtering them through the needs and wants of others. I fell asleep that night to the distant sounds of city life filtering through my slightly open window, feeling both older and younger than my 58 years, both more vulnerable and more powerful than I had felt in a very long time. The next morning, I woke to a text message from James. We need to talk about the house. Can I come over today? Yes, I replied. I'll text you the address. When he arrived that afternoon, his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, his normally neat appearance slightly rumpled. He stood awkwardly in my doorway for a moment before I stepped forward to hug him, feeling his arms wrapped tightly around me in response. Come in, I said, leading him to the living room. Can I get you something to drink? Just water, thanks, he replied, sinking onto my new sofa. His gaze moved around the apartment, taking in the furnishings and decorations. This is nice, Mom. It suits you. Thank you, I said, handing him a glass of water before sitting across from him. So, you wanted to talk about the house? He nodded, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so like his father that it made my heart ache. We can't afford to keep it not with the payment amount you showed me. We've looked at refinancing, but the interest rates are terrible right now. Stephanie's company announced layoffs yesterday, and while she hasn't been let go, her hours are being reduced. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. Yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks, he admitted. We're thinking we should sell the house and find something smaller, maybe a condo that's more within our budget. I nodded, unsurprised by this conclusion. That seems sensible. The thing is, he continued, not meeting my eyes, legally, the house is still yours. We'd need your cooperation to sell it. Of course, I agreed. I'm happy to work with you on that. He looked up, relief evident on his face. Really, I wasn't sure after everything, James, I said gently. I'm not trying to punish you. I just needed to remove myself from a situation that had become unhealthy for all of us. But I still want what's best for you and Lily. And Stephanie, he asked quietly. I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best policy. I want what's best for her too, though I think it may take some time for us to rebuild any kind of relationship. He nodded, accepting this. She regrets sending that text about limiting your time with Lily. She was angry and scared. I understand that, I said, but threats like that cross a line that shouldn't be crossed, especially when they involve children. I know, he sighed. I told her the same thing. We've been doing a lot of talking these past couple of weeks, more honest communication than we've had in a long time, actually. It's been eye-opening. In what way? I asked, curious about what insights they might have gained. Just seeing how much we've both been taking for granted, how much we've been expecting from others instead of stepping up ourselves. He took a sip of water. I didn't realize how much I'd been avoiding conflict by letting Stephanie have her way about everything while counting on you to absorb the costs, both financial and emotional. It wasn't fair to either of you. His self-awareness surprised and touched me. That's a valuable realization. Yeah, he agreed. Expensive, but valuable. We spent the next hour discussing practical matters, the process of selling the house division of furniture and household items, what James and Stephanie's next steps might be. The conversation was more adult and equal than any we'd had in years. As he was preparing to leave, he paused at the door. "Would you like to come see Lily tomorrow? She really misses you." "I'd love that," I said, unable to keep the emotion from my voice. "More than anything." "Good," he nodded. "And, Mom, I'm sorry. For everything, I should have seen what was happening and stood up for you. Dad would have been so disappointed in me. Your father would have understood that we all make mistakes," I assured him, touching his cheek gently. "The important thing is that we learn from them." After he left, I stood at my window watching him walk to his car, feeling that we had taken the first small step on a long road toward healing our relationship. It wouldn't be quick or easy, but for the first time in months, I felt hopeful that we would find our way back to each other differently. Perhaps, but possibly stronger for having weathered this storm. 6 months passed in a blur of adjustment and recalibration. My apartment no longer felt new, but comfortably lived in, decorated with select treasures from my previous life and new items that reflected who I was becoming. The small balcony now boasted container gardens of herbs and flowers, and the built-in bookshelves were filled with not just old favorites, but new discoveries as I reclaimed my love of reading. My relationship with Lily had not only survived the transition, but flourished in unexpected ways. After that first emotional reunion, we had established a regular schedule of visits. Wednesday afternoons and Saturday mornings became grandma time, sacred hours when she would come to my apartment for activities tailored to her growing capabilities and interests. At 20 months old, she was a whirlwind of energy and new words, delighting in the songs and games we played together. Up, Gamma, up, she would demand, raising her arms to be lifted for our special greeting ritual, a series of kisses and tickles that never failed to produce peals of laughter. These focused quality hours with her proved in many ways more meaningful than the constant but divided attention I had given her when living in the same house, without the distractions of household management and workplace stress. I could be fully present for our time together, creating memories that I hoped would form the foundation of a lifelong bond. James and Stephanie had indeed sold the house, a bittersweet process for all involved. The real estate market had been kind, providing them with enough profit to purchase a modest 3-bedroom townhouse closer to both their workplaces. The shorter commute and reduced living expenses had eased some of the financial pressure they'd been under, though Stephanie's reduced work hours meant they were still budgeting carefully. My relationship with James had slowly mended through honest conversations and shared responsibility for Lily. The son who had become a stranger was finding his way back to me, though our relationship had matured into something more balanced than before, less parent and child, more two adults who shared a deep familial bond. Stephanie remained a more complicated story. Our interactions were civil but cool, primarily focused on logistics regarding Lily. She no longer made cutting remarks or dismissive gestures, but genuine warmth was absent. I had accepted that we might never be close, but we could be respectful for the sake of the family we both loved. Until one Wednesday in April when she arrived to drop off Lily at my apartment. "Can I come in for a few minutes?" she asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. "There's something I'd like to talk about." Surprised, I invited her in, settling Lily with her favorite picture books while Stephanie and I sat at my small dining table. "This is a lovely place," she commented, looking around. "Very peaceful." "Thank you," I replied, waiting for her to get to the point of her visit. She fidgeted with her wedding ring, turning it around her finger repeatedly before finally speaking. "I owe you an apology, Maud. A real one, not the half-hearted ones I've offered before." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart rate quickened. "I'm listening." "What I said that night about you being our maid, it was cruel and untrue. I knew it would hurt you, and I said it anyway." She met my eyes directly for the first time in months. "I've been thinking a lot about why I behaved that way, not just that night, but throughout the time we lived together. I wasn't raised to be unkind or disrespectful to others." "What conclusions have you reached?" I asked, genuinely curious about her self-reflection. "I think I was jealous," she admitted, the words seemingly difficult to voice. "Of your relationship with James, with the house, with the life you had built. It felt like I was living in someone else's story, trying to carve out space for myself where I didn't really belong." "I can understand that," I said slowly. It must have been challenging to move into a home with so much history that wasn't yours. She nodded. That doesn't excuse how I treated you. I should have talked about my feelings instead of trying to push you out of your own spaces, both physical and emotional. And I definitely shouldn't have threatened to keep Lily from you. That was unforgivable. Yet here we are discussing forgiveness, I observed. Are we? She asked, a flicker of hope crossing her face. I considered her question carefully. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Stephanie. It's a process. I think we're in that process now. I'd like that, she said quietly. James and I have been working with a marriage counselor trying to build healthier patterns of communication. It's been illuminating. I'm glad to hear that, I said sincerely. Every relationship requires work and growth. Including ours, she acknowledged. I don't expect us to become best friends overnight or maybe ever, but I want Lily to grow up seeing mutual respect between her mother and grandmother. I want her to know that people can make mistakes, own them, and do better. That's a worthy goal, I agreed, and an important lesson for her to learn. We talked for another 15 minutes, not solving all our issues, but laying groundwork for a different kind of relationship going forward. When it was time for her to leave, she hesitated at the door. Thank you for hearing me out, she said, and for continuing to be such a wonderful grandmother to Lily despite everything. She makes it easy, I replied, looking over at my granddaughter, now deeply engaged in a conversation with her stuffed bunny. She's the best of all of us. After Stephanie left, I felt a lightness that had been absent for a long time. Not all wounds were healed, not all bridges rebuilt, but we had taken an important step toward a more peaceful coexistence. The months of independence had brought other positive changes to my life as well. I had expanded my accounting practice, taking on several new clients who appreciated my experience and attention to detail. I had rekindled old friendships and formed new ones, joining a book club that met monthly at the local library and a walking group that explored different neighborhoods each weekend. And somewhat to my surprise, I had begun dating again. Tom Harmon was a kind widower I met at a community garden workshop, a former high school science teacher with gentle hands and a ready laugh. Our relationship was progressing slowly but sweetly, neither of us in a rush, both appreciative of the unexpected gift of companionship in our later years. You look different, Linda remarked over lunch one day. Lighter somehow, more yourself. I feel more myself, I admitted, which is strange because I'm not sure I knew who that self was until recently. That's what happens when you spend decades defining yourself primarily through relationships to others, she said wisely. Mother, wife, caretaker, all worthy roles, but not the whole of who you are. I don't regret those roles, I clarified. I loved being Robert's wife, I loved being James's mother and Lily's grandmother, but I'm learning there's room for more for being Maud as well. To Maud, Linda said, raising her iced tea in a toast. Long may she reign. I laughed and clinked my glass against hers, grateful for her steadfast friendship through all the changes. Later that evening, as I watered my balcony plants and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the humiliation of being called the Maid to the liberation of handing over those house keys, from the pain of separation to the joy of rediscovery, it had been a path I never expected to walk, but one that had led me to a place of unexpected contentment. The difficult moments had served their purpose, forcing me to recognize my own worth and teaching me that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. The keys I had placed on that coffee table had unlocked not just a door leading out, but a door leading into a deeper understanding of myself and what I truly needed to thrive. As the last light faded from the sky, I made a silent promise to myself, to Robert's memory, and to Lily's future. I would never again allow myself to be diminished or taken for granted. I would model for my granddaughter what it meant to be a woman of strength and dignity, of generosity and appropriate boundaries of forgiveness without foolishness. The woman who had felt invisible in her own home was gone. In her place stood someone older and wiser, someone who had learned through painful experience that true love never requires the sacrifice of self-respect, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to simply hand over the keys and walk away. Looking back now, a year after that fateful dinner when Stephanie callously called me the maid. I barely recognized the woman I was then, the person who allowed herself to be gradually edged out of her own home, who accepted criticism and disrespect with a forced smile, who believed that self-sacrifice was the only way to remain connected to her family. Seems like a stranger to me now. The journey from there to here wasn't easy or straightforward. There were moments of doubt nights when I wondered if I had overreacted, days when the absence of Lily's daily presence felt like a physical ache. But through it all, a quiet certainty sustained me, a growing conviction that I had made the necessary choice not just for my own well-being, but ultimately for the health of our entire family system. James and Stephanie have settled into their townhouse, creating a home that truly reflects their own tastes and priorities, rather than trying to carve space within someone else's established domain. Their marriage seems stronger for having weathered the crisis, their communication more direct and honest. James has stepped more fully into his role as a husband and father, no longer relying on me as a buffer or facilitator. Stephanie has found more security in her position, no longer feeling the need to assert control through criticism or manipulation. As for Lily, now 2 years old and a bundle of curiosity and enthusiasm, she thrives in the clarity of our new arrangement. She knows that Wednesdays and Saturdays are special, grandma days, and she bursts into my apartment with excited anticipation of our time together. We bake simple cookies, read stacks of picture books, sing silly songs, and take walks to the park, where she fearlessly tackles the tallest slide while I stand ready to catch her. Again, Gamma, she'll demand, after each successful descent, her face alight with the pure joy of the moment. The depth of my love for her has only grown unhindered now by the complications of shared household management or conflicting parental philosophies. In our dedicated time together, I can focus entirely on nurturing our relationship, creating the foundation for what I hope will be a lifelong bond of love and trust. My relationship with Stephanie has evolved into something I never expected. While we may never share the easy affection of natural friends, we have developed a mutual respect that serves us both well. Our conversations now extend beyond mere logistics about Lily to occasional sharing of ideas or experiences. Last month, she even asked my advice about a work situation, a small but significant indication of a new level of trust between us. "I value your perspective," she told me afterward. "You see things clearly." Coming from her, this simple acknowledgement felt like a profound shift in our dynamic. The woman who had once dismissed my opinions and contributions now sought them out, a healing balm for old wounds. James and I have rebuilt our relationship on more equal footing. He calls regularly, not out of obligation, but genuine desire to connect. We meet for lunch occasionally, just the two of us, conversations flowing easily between practical matters and deeper reflections on life, love, and family. He has apologized multiple times for his failure to recognize or intervene in the unhealthy patterns that developed in our shared household. "I was so caught up in trying to keep the peace that I couldn't see the damage being done," he admitted during one of our lunches. "Dad would have handled it so much better." "Your father had his own learning curve," I assured him. "No one gets relationships perfectly right the first time around. It's the willingness to grow and change that matters." My life outside family relationships has blossomed in ways I never anticipated. My accounting practice has expanded to the point where I've had to become selective about new clients, focusing on small businesses and individuals whose values align with my own. I've joined the board of a local nonprofit that provides financial literacy education to women in transition, finding deep satisfaction in helping others navigate economic independence. My friendship circle has widened, bringing new perspectives and experiences into my world. The book club has introduced me to literature I might never have discovered on my own, while the walking group has revealed hidden corners of our city I never knew existed despite decades of residence. And then there's Tom, whose presence in my life continues to be a source of unexpected joy. Our relationship has deepened gradually, neither of us rushing or forcing a connection that feels both comfortable and invigorating. We share a love of gardening, classical music, and quiet evenings of conversation. He makes me laugh with his dry wit and touches me with his thoughtful gestures, like the miniature herb garden he created for my kitchen window, or the handcrafted bookmarks he leaves in volumes he thinks I might enjoy. I never expected to find someone again, I confided to him one evening as we sat on my balcony, watching stars appear in the twilight sky. Neither did I, he admitted, his hand warm around mine. After Marion died, I thought that chapter of my life was closed. I'm glad I was wrong. We are taking things slowly, enjoying the present without forcing definitions or expectations onto what might come next. At our age, we both understand the preciousness of time and the importance of spending it wisely and well. The greatest lesson I've learned through this entire experience is about the true nature of love and respect both for others and for myself. Love that demands self-erasure isn't love at all, but dependency or control masquerading as affection. Genuine love makes space for each person to exist fully, to speak their truth, to maintain their dignity, even in conflict or disagreement. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, as I once feared, but necessary for authentic connection. By reclaiming my space, my time, and my sense of self-worth, I paradoxically became more available for meaningful relationship, unburdened by resentment or martyrdom. The day I handed over those house keys was the day I reclaimed not just my independence, but my personal power. The keys that unlocked the front door of my former home also unlocked a door within myself, revealing strengths and possibilities I had forgotten or never fully recognized. I sometimes wonder what Robert would think of all that has transpired since his passing. I like to believe he would be proud of me for finally standing up for myself, for refusing to be diminished or erased, for finding the courage to walk away from a situation that was slowly draining my spirit. You always were stronger than you gave yourself credit for, he used to tell me. Perhaps he saw in me what I am only now beginning to fully understand and embrace. As I look toward the future, I feel a sense of peaceful anticipation rather than anxiety or dread. Whatever comes next, I face it as a whole person, grounded in self-knowledge and self-respect. The woman who was once called the Maid in her own home now stands tall in her own truth, grateful for the difficult journey that led to this place of authentic living. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to reclaim your dignity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel for more real-life experiences. Share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, it's never too late to rediscover your worth and create boundaries that protect it.